Smiling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's sink or swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. Welcome to the shrimp tank. Want to put it all together, this is big thanks. Doing big things, we ain't in the same league. Running a campaign, Roadie 2016. Like a phone to die, putting me in charge. I'm a general, from the front I'ma lead the charge. Like a federal, fell on my lap never. Going hard as ever.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode here on the Shrimp Tank Podcast, powered by Celsius Beverage. This is your first time tuning in. You catch all our amazing episodes up on our website, shrimptankpodcast.com, where we get to interview the best and brightest entrepreneurs from South Florida, finding the do's and don'ts of running a business. And we are joined with Kevin Cox, the director of the FU Adams Center for Entrepreneurship, as well as Jessica Del Vecchio, who is a common co-host on the show with us lately, celebrating the 100-year centennial event at Boca Raton this year. And to kick things off, Kevin, why don't you say a couple words about Jessica, and then we're going to bring in our guest, Ian.
Oh, yeah, it's great to work with Jessica in the city. I mean, they're great promoters and supporters of entrepreneurship and economic development throughout the city of Boca. Boca's come a long ways in the past 100 years. It's unrecognizable, really. So the city, their office, what they do is really important, and it supports local business owners. So it's a perfect fit for the Shrimp Tank.
Yeah, Jessica, say a couple words about what's happening this year in 2025 to celebrate the 100th year celebration.
Sure. So Boca Raton is officially 100 years. And like you said, a lot of changes over the 100 years. I moved here in 91, and there have been a lot of changes since that, all for the better for the most part, and smart growth. And just this past weekend, we had the 100-year celebration at the Brick with the Drone Show, 2 shows, and the concert of Weezer at Meisner Park. But all year long, we have events going on, and it's boca100.com if you want to see what's taking place in the city for the remainder of the year to celebrate.
All right, if there's one event that all the students, all the residents, and everybody should make sure they don't miss, what is it and when is it?
Oh, that's a good question. I think you have to go on the site because they have things for storytelling, things for art and culture, things for entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of different types of things. They're trying to hit every segment of Boca Raton. So I think you would have to check out the website.
Yeah, so something for everybody. It depends. All right.
Okay, let's jump right into the show today. We have Ian Weiner here. If you've been to Restaurant Row, you might be familiar with his business. So PEBB Enterprises is the one behind Restaurant Row. So Ian, to kick things off, can you share a little bit about the business in 60 seconds or less? We always like to share with the students how elevator pitches really go. You meet someone quickly in an elevator and you have 60 seconds to tell people about your business. And we find it super important to quickly get to the point. So go for it.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So PEBB Enterprises is a Boca-based real estate development and investment company. We focus primarily on commercial real estate, so that's retail and office. We have some strategic partnerships with residential developers and have some mixed-use sites. Most of our portfolio is in the state of Florida. We own assets throughout the country. I'd say half of our portfolio right now is actually in Boca Raton. So live in Boca, based in Boca, very focused on Boca Raton, and also throughout the state of Florida, like I mentioned.
Okay, that was pretty good, Kevin.
Yeah, that was good.
You nailed that.
You nailed it.
So tell us a little bit about your connection to FAU. Of course, there's a big building on campus, and you guys, have a thing or two behind that, of course.
Yeah, so on the north side of FAU campus is a collection of properties called the Research Park at FAU. So about 3 years ago, we purchased that alongside our joint venture partner, Banyan Development. So it's a collection of 7 buildings, about 350,000 square feet. That is on a ground lease with the university. And we are tasked with leasing it to tenants that kind of work alongside the university in a research, technology, medical use. So there's has to be alignment between tenants that we're signing leases with and the university. So working hand in hand with the university, Andrew Duffel, and a lot of the deans of the different colleges. So it's very interesting to see kind of as FAU has evolved, the types of tenants that want to be on campus and working with the students at the campus. So
it really makes up like an important component of our entrepreneurship ecosystem, right? So here at the Adams Center, we really stay focused on education. We have a bunch of programs to support that. you're on one, right? We do the podcast, but also entrepreneurship boot camps, veterans programs. Subsequent to that, most entrepreneurs, well, the top ones, they end up in our accelerator, the runway at Florida Atlantic. And that's kind of for early stage ideation. They get a lot of support. Jason's a successful alumni from that program. But then the question becomes, where do they go next, right? When they turn into a real company, they're generating revenue. And one answer can be the research park if they're a good fit for the university. And it's really great for the university as well, right? It's mutually beneficial because what it does is it provides opportunities for students like yourselves to work at fast-growing, young, innovative, technologically advanced companies right here on the back of campus. I have a couple students who are interning at various companies right now.
I think it's important to also mention that the city of Boca Raton supports those initiatives, not just saying that we support the initiatives. We provide grant funding out of my budget, the economic development budget for the tech runway. We give annual funding to the research park at FAU. We've now partnered with 1909 out of West Palm to bring some of their programming here. And we are looking to connect with the Adams Center relatively soon to complete our documents and have an agreement with you all too. So we're very proud of the technology that's coming out of FAU and Boca Raton as a whole. You know, as a PC computer was developed here, we don't want to get away from that. We don't want to look back 100 years. We want to look forward 100 years. So you guys are great partners. So thank you.
Okay, and give us the backstory, right? You became CEO at a young age. You know, tell us your early days as you graduated college, kind of how you jumped into the real estate industry as a whole.
Sure. So I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, studied real estate undergrad there, then decided to get my law degree up in New York at Cardozo Law School, planning on kind of doing transactional real estate. Real estate was always my passion. PEBB Enterprises is a family business. So eventually my plan was to join the business. Graduated law school in 2009, kind of during the Great Recession. There was no transactional real estate because the world was kind of stopped. So at that time, family business was kind of expanding, growing. I decided to join back in 2010 or so. And then a few years later, kind of as I grew my role, learning all the different departments, leasing, property management, asset management, acquisitions, became the president. And since then I've kind of expanded the company, taking on new different developments, different partnerships, and really taking a local South Florida based company to a more national footprint.
And what was the most difficult thing working part of a family business? We hear this as a common theme. Sounds easy, but there's a lot of talks at the kitchen table, holidays, and I'm sure you go on for hours.
We can definitely spend a couple episodes on that. So it's kind of there's great aspects of a family business. Usually your interests are aligned. There's a deep level of trust and relationships, but on the flip side, there's a lot of dynamics, and it's hard to separate kind of the business from the family. So you have something happen in the office, you go out for dinner, it's hard to separate those lines. So you kind of hear all the stats of.
Well, just give us some tips then, because there's a lot of family business owners out there that are probably going to listen to this episode. And you've overcome a lot with your family, I'm sure. So what would be just a couple, tips, if they're early on in their journey working with their family business?
I think you have to kind of look at the positives, and the alignment, like I said, the legacy, and hey, people have differences, whether it's your family member or a key employee, and because of those alignments, I think it is easier to navigate because they are hopefully coming from the right place. So I think communication is key, making sure that the family knows what they want to do and how to do it. And, governance, I think a lot of families just kind of say, hey, we'll just figure it out over time. And then things happen and it gets messier. So kind of governance and, just making sure there's a pure alignment, and then everything else kind of falls into place. But you have to kind of weigh the pros and the cons, and it is challenging, and if it could work, it's a beautiful thing.
I say meet with a therapist like Kevin Cox over here, right? Often meeting with a professor, they kind of break down a lot of the data with family businesses. Can you touch on that for a second, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. We really have a family business expert who used to be on the show all the time. Dr. Roland Kidwell's here right at Florida Atlantic University, and he really focuses all his research, energy, and efforts in that family business space because it is very unique and it does come with a lot of potential conflict and challenges, but it can also be a great opportunity. So we have people like that who specialize in dealing with those issues, because South Florida, there's a ton of family businesses down here. So it's a great resource for the university to have.
Okay, let's go into the business in more detail, right? Explain kind of how this fully operates from a 101 level, right? A lot of people see, these strip malls, they see Starbucks on one quarter, Dunkin' Donuts on the other, McDonald's, and they really don't know, like, the first thing, how this all evolves. So kind of explain it, like, how do you find the properties, how you purchase them, what you do afterwards.
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways to kind of own, operate real estate. Some people are just buyers of existing properties. Some people are developers. We kind of do both. And I'd say there's a lot fewer developers just because of the risks and the challenges in that. But, from a development standpoint, you find a parcel of land, you think it makes a good retail shopping center, you have maybe some tenants that are interested. If it's zoned retail, that's great. If it's not zoned, you have to go through the municipality, whether it's Boca, whether it's Delray, and usually that's an 18 to 24 month process where you have to change it from maybe residential to retail. And in that time, you're obviously carrying the cost of the land, and it's expensive, and things can change over that course. So there's a lot of risk in development. But you buy this center, get it entitled to retail, you find the tenants, you hire a GC. And I'm making this sound very simple. It's it takes 2+ years and a lot of team, work and a lot of consultants to kind of get it off the ground. And then, you need financing to obviously capitalize it, whether it's your own equity, whether it's partnership equity. So a lot goes into it on a development. On an existing, you find a good property, you negotiate a price, you get, debt, you get equity, and you buy it. And hopefully, for us, we're value add, operator. So if we're buying something, we're not going to buy something that's 100% leased and has no future value. We try to buy broken problems, whether it's the developer who has an issue or the tenancy has an issue, or for some reason it's not performing. We like to come in, put our hands-on approach, and create the value, and then we either decide to hold it long term or sell it to the next buyer.
And Jessica, how is it like working with someone like Ian, for example, and his brand compared to others, right? Do you have your regulars where it makes your life easy because they have so much experience in Boca Raton already? Just want to see it from your standpoint.
I think the experience definitely shines through on someone like PEBB Enterprises, but I also think because they're local owners, they really care. Sometimes out of state business opportunities come around and they don't know the players, they don't know the community, they don't know who's here, but they know the community. They truly live, work, play here. So I think that makes all the world of a difference. But yes.
Ian, what do you think about equity-based, real estate crowdfunding? There's a couple of these big platforms. Like, I'm super familiar with rewards-based crowdfunding, and students, you're familiar with that, even if you don't think so. That's Kickstarter, Indiegogo, those types of things. Then came along equity-based crowdfunding. I work with some founders to that. What I tell people about that is it's great for founders. It's terrible for investors. Never invest in that. What about real estate crowdfunding?
Yeah, I'd probably echo those thoughts. And there have been some cases recently of, developers, using, nefarious means with investors' money, and the documents usually that investors sign, is pretty one-sided. So there have been a few platforms that have done it. I think in theory it sounds like it could be successful, but a lot of times the developers are putting properties in there that they can't capitalize elsewhere because there's issues, and then they're hoping that they find a retail investor that doesn't know anything and is willing to put $5,000, $10,000, whatever the amount is, with documents that are so in their favor. So I would say buyer beware if you're an investor. But I think over time it should, there needs to be a more efficient marketplace to take owners and investors of real estate and capital, because that right now is it's inefficient. Crowdfunding could be a way, but right now it's still early stages and a little sketchy.
Yeah, I mean, founders essentially get to, at least on the equity side, determine their own valuation, which is not going to be friendly for the investors. Typically,
and usually they bake in a lot of over market fees. So
at
the
that's
end of
the other
day,
problem
they
with
have no
the
skin in the
platform.
game, and it's all on the investors who are typically not real estate investors and just don't know how to underwrite a deal. So
let's talk a little bit about the future of the company. Like, are you trying to double in 3 years, for example, or is this more the model 5 to 10% growth, smooth sailing, really, sharing the experience with your current employees, your current team? We have so many stories that come into the shrimp tank that want to keep growing and growing, but we have a lot of brands that are like, no, like it's nice, smooth sailing and not putting more pressure on you, like putting out fire after fire with employees, hiring, and just growth problems in general.
Yeah, I'd say it's a balance. Right now we're really focused on our operations and getting that shored up, as we think once that is operating at kind of peak performance, we will be able to scale more. Right now, last couple of years we've been very active. We have several developments going on right now that are taking a lot of time and bandwidth, but are seeing some interesting opportunities and don't want to add more if we can't handle what we have. So we have been growing the team, making key hires, but really I think it's smart strategic growth. We're not just buying anything to buy it. It's got to make sense. We'd love to do more in the city of Boca, Palm Beach County, which we're very bullish on, and continue to see opportunities in there. So if we can figure out the opportunities and do it in a smart way, we'd love to continue to buy more and develop more and invest more.
All right. So you oversee millions of square feet of property, right? What is the weirdest or most unexpected issue you've ever had to deal with in one of the properties?
Weirdest and most unexpected. I'd say nothing that is crazy weird. You get people that are homeless at your properties and you're touring a tenant to show the space, and that usually is not a great recipe for success. Fortunately we haven't had we do a good amount of diligence, so there hasn't been like any environmental issues. We have owned some medical marijuana retail stores, so those maybe are a little different, but typically we're buying retail centers, office buildings, and for the most part don't have
all right. I got another
crazy stories. We've had hurricanes rip off roofs and stuff like that, but we're in South Florida.
Okay,
so
let's say you're going to build your dream plaza, right? It's great for you. You got it full of 5 of your perfect customers with leases. What are those 5 businesses?
Like the name brands of tenants that exist today. Well,
what's your dream plaza look like? Who's in there?
Well, as a real estate investor, there's always a mix between like the quality of the tenant, the credit behind the tenant, and then the cool factor of the tenant. Is cool doesn't always mean that they're gonna survive.
Okay, so maybe you're looking for a mix,
right?
I'd say a lot of restaurants right now. South Florida restaurants are hot. Like, we talked about Restaurant Row. So Motec that, just opened up is kind of that cool, but they're also just a great operator and have, great fundamentals. A lot of the tenants I'd say in the mall, Lululemons of the world are kind of, that RH, Restoration Hardware is kind of, in the retail world, there's like the mix between, great credit and just, they have loyal fan bases. Trader Joe's, those types of tenants are kind of, as retail developers, if you can get one of those at your property, they totally transform it and make it. We're also doing
I've been in that parking lot before. It's terrible. Trader Joe's, no matter where you go to Trader Joe's, the parking lot's crazy.
Another one that we're actually bringing to Boca is Equinox Gym. They're coming to our new project up at the former Office Depot campus, so that's going to be their first location in Boca, and we think that's just an elevated gym that doesn't exist in this market and is going to do super well. So it's that mix between cool and credit is
Lifetime better watch out.
Just please don't bring Zara to this area or I'll go bankrupt. My wife always has to go all the way to Aventura Mall to get there, so if it's too close, I'm in trouble.
Boca has definitely increased their game, and a lot of the retailers recognize how strong of a market Boca is, and they first go to Miami and Aventura, but Boca is definitely right up there on the top of the list of where people want to be.
All right, do you see any trends in commercial real estate that you would say are overrated? Right, like people designing a specific trendy type of property or something you just don't think is going to work out over the longer term. We know in the entrepreneurship world, like co-working got really, really hot for a while, and then it was kind of like, this can also be kind of annoying, and sometimes it's better to just have an office. Like, What do you see right now that might be overrated?
Yeah, co-working probably is the top, and yeah, also the remote work, which I don't know if it's a trend, but we're just seeing companies, shift away from that. So where before they were saying, hey, we don't need all this office space, they've come back and say we actually need this office space because our productivity is down. So those are trends. Yeah, the old office parks, everything right now has to be mixed use amenities. People, if they're going to come to the office, they want to be able to walk to a restaurant. They're going to want to walk to a gym. So I think that is a trend that should stay, and you're seeing all these new projects combine the live, work, play. So have the retail, have the office, have the residential, a hotel, other amenities. Transportation is a trend. The Bright Line is those are important. But yeah, having remote work or co-working space, people want an office that they come to.
Yeah, and you make a great point about kind of walkability.
Mhm.
Those places are unique. That's one of the challenges right here at Florida Atlantic. I'm sure that resonates with the students, right? If you want to grab something from off campus, it's a long walk from here to get off of this campus.
Especially in the summer.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a ton of resources on campus, obviously, for them, but otherwise you kind of do need a car, which can be challenging, especially when we have so many international students and students that are from down here who may or may not have brought a vehicle. So certainly a challenge.
Just to plug the city one more time. So we have the Connect in downtown Boca that gets people around. It's like a circuit. And
Yeah.
I know they're looking to do something with FAU pretty soon to kind of pilot program something like that, because we see that, Boca's 29 square miles. So it's very sprawling. It's very hard to get from point A to point B. So that would be something really cool to do at FAU.
Yeah, I hope that works out.
Yeah.
Ian, talk about the Starbucks effect. When I go into any parking lot and there's a Starbucks, right? It's just a rotisserie of more people entering and exiting all the time. So tell us behind the scenes what it's like to partner with a Starbucks. Do they get reduced pricing? Do they get the same pricing? Do they get better benefits on the leasing terms? Because we just see more volume in those parking lots, of course, that have Starbucks.
Yeah, I'd say those types of tenants, the Starbucks, the Trader Joe's, the Chick-fil-A's that generate traffic, usually get some preferred pricing because they're the anchor, and you want them to come because other people will follow. But at the same time, there's limited options for them to come, and if you have a great site, they will pay for it. So those are the types of tenants you want if you're kickstarting off a development. Because there's a lot of cross shopping. They go Starbucks, they'll walk next door. The parking lot is kind of jammed, which used to be like a negative thing. Hey, they take up too much parking, but I think now people realize the more people at a property, the better. The cities are becoming better with kind of their parking requirements, so you don't have these seas of parking. But yeah, those are the tenants.
And what about on the other side? You get tenants that, of course, go out of business quite commonly, right? A lot of restaurants, a lot of types of gyms, right? And you see it all the time. Someone does a big build out for $500,000 to $1 million. And then 6 months later to a year later, they're out of business. And that doesn't look good, right? So how do you handle where someone is excited to sign a lease, right? But, you kind of have a feeling that statistically it's a higher likelihood of them not being in business in the 5 years they're signing an agreement for example.
Yeah, it's common in this industry, unfortunately, and that's kind of where you kind of have to do some diligence on the front end and see what their financials are, see if they've run successful businesses. Is this a new concept? Is this their third location? And sometimes you turn down tenants that want to be there because you just don't have confidence that they will be successful in the long run. I think last couple of years, retail has really rebounded since COVID. We never thought that e-commerce was going to kill retail. It's kind of gone the opposite effect. So now we're seeing less store closures, more tenants that want to have demand. So on any vacant space that we are getting these days, we usually have 3 or 4 options, so we can kind of make smart decisions based on some of those metrics. And you're never batting 1,000, but if you can bat hit more than you strike out, it's usually a recipe for success. And then you obviously want these tenants to invest into their own space. You don't want to use your own money because then they have no skin in the game. And a lot of these are small mom and pop family businesses, and you can kind of feel that, hey, this is super important to them. This is not just a hobby, and this is their livelihood. And those types of tenants, even if they don't have good credit, you might bet on because you feel confident that they're going to succeed.
Let's get some advice from entrepreneurs, right? I work with a ton of founders, and it should be no surprise. They don't all work out, unfortunately, right? So let's say you were advising a founder who has a long lease, 4 or 5 years remaining, and they seem to have seemingly figured out that like this business model is not going to work at this location, and I'm just not going to be able to be profitable and afford this lease. What should they do? What can they do?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to be transparent and to come to the landlord earlier, which is probably the opposite of what they want to do.
Yeah.
But the sooner we can work to figure it out and maybe find a replacement tenant and minimize any downtime or future build out costs, the better. Because if it goes on and your rent payments are late and you're accruing a big balance, then it gets more complicated. So I think from us the best one is hey, not everything works out. Be honest, open about it, and try to figure out a way to do that, because we'll be much more cooperative that way than if you don't take our calls or answer our emails, then we don't know what is going on. So I think like in a lot of
I
things,
imagine there's definitely ways to minimize kind of like the fallout. It's not going to be great either way, but minimizing and mitigating that could be real helpful.
Yeah, and in today's market, there's, like I said, there's a lot of demand. So usually if somebody comes out, there's somebody that wants to come back in, and then that offsets a lot of their liabilities. And we're not looking to punitively injure somebody if we get kind of the same economic benefit. But if they're not working with us, then it gets a little more complicated.
All right.
Okay, let's get some students to come up here and join. Any students that want to ask a question, feel free to come on down. And of course, Ian, afterwards, we'd love to share if there's opportunities with the brand, right? You guys have won a lot of awards, best companies to work for. And I'm sure there could be internship opportunities, and a lot of people in the crowd are seniors that, of course, could take you up on opportunity. Okay, one student is coming on down.
Thank you for coming, Ian. Real estate is a long game. What do you do in the short term to keep yourself busy on a day-to-day basis?
I have 3 kids that keep me very busy. I don't have too much time for hobbies, but like to travel and go boating and play golf and stuff like that. But I think it's important to have that balance as much as you can, because otherwise you're just going to burn yourself out and not enjoy the process. So you got to have that somewhat of a balance, and I try to find as many opportunities as I can.
And then the Office Depot, the redevelopment, how do you go about something that big?
It's kind of like 5 projects within one. We bought the whole center. We're selling a piece of it to a related group and developing 500 apartments, building an Equinox and some retail, and then leasing up office. So it takes a village, internally, externally, partnerships, a lot of moving parts, and it's that's the long game. That's going to be a 5-year total project from kind of start to finish. But being local and feeling passionate about the real estate and understanding that kind of makes it all worth it. And then hopefully we make some money on it too.
And then one more, if you were 20 years old, just got out, or 21, graduated with $50,000, what would you do to get into real estate? With the knowledge you have now.
I wouldn't buy anything immediately. I'd work for take any job you can in the industry, be a sponge. Real estate is very much relationship driven. So I think, the more you forge relationships, those will benefit you in the long run. So I'd invest in yourself, not in real estate. I'd, take courses, get a job. Real life experiences is the most important. And the beauty about real estate, especially retail, is everyone kind of touches and feels it on a daily basis. So it's not like this abstract, concept. You go to a shopping center, that a Starbucks is a busy store, and the store next door, has no traffic. So kind of intuitively, you kind of understand it. But I think getting that experience, is most important. And making relationships, and sooner or later you're going to land into
Would you
something.
advise a recent graduate to get a real estate license and try to become a realtor? I think last time I looked at the data, there were just way too many licenses out there, it seemed, at least in Florida.
Yeah, so commercial is different. You don't necessarily need, we have one broker of record in our company, and then we have people that kind of go off of that. Residential's different, but I don't think it's an important skill. I think for younger kids, like the financial analysis, Excel and modeling is typically the most important part of the industry, because you have to understand the numbers to make it work, unless you're in property management, which is more like physical real estate. But brokerage is not that important in commercial, at least.
Thank you.
Good questions.
How you doing? So you mentioned early on in your career that you took over this whole enterprise. And one question for me, or for you, is what is one thing that you did early on, or one belief that you had that you would see now as incorrect or something you shouldn't be doing?
That's a deep question. I think it's thinking everything when you don't, because there's a lot to learn, and really it takes experience to know a lot. And I'm still relatively young, and I still don't know a lot, because you only experience certain things. In real estate, it's very cyclical. So I've only been in a position to be in one or two downturns, and you kind of learn that. But I think it's just being naive and thinking everything, and you really have to kind of listen and find the mentors, take the education, work with people who have been through different cycles and developments and stuff like that. And just you're always learning.
For sure. Thank you.
When you're when you're up at Cordoza doing law school, how did you prioritize your personal life and your work life and school life?
I was probably a bad example, but I kind of didn't take law school as seriously as I should have, and kind of just coasted more so.
Away from it.
So I did what I needed to do, but I wasn't in the library 24/7, and I was up in New York City, so it's hard to not be able to enjoy that. And my take on school is it's important, but you also have to do things in the real world too. Like, you can't learn everything from a book. So it's finding that balance, and eventually landed me where I needed to be, and thankful for the experience. But I wasn't going to be at the top of the class and get into a top law firm. That was never my path.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Julia. So as an architecture student who really admires and want to understand more of real estate and development, how would you describe the relationship in between the construction phase and the business part? Like, how do you handle that?
They're all super interconnected. So we have we're vertically integrated. So we have some in-house construction and development people on our team, and they interact with the architects, the general contractors, the civil engineers, and kind of work hand in hand. And the business side has to figure out what a development can support, what cost you can pay, based on what revenue you're receiving, and then design a building that can support that, because you can't just design the Taj Mahal if you're not getting the rents to support it. So sometimes you have to value engineer, and that's working with the architects, and working with an architect that has built this type of project to know, like, hey, what is necessary for a shopping center? How much outdoor space do you need? How much overhang for Florida? If you have restaurants, you need some cover. So they're super intertwined, and that's the exciting part of it, is you're working on teams, whether they're internal or external.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew Vladimir. Nice to meet you. My question is, working in commercial real estate, you probably deal a lot with different parking lots for the spaces that you own. So in your opinion, do you think that we should be moving towards more walkable cities with less car use and more public transportation? Or do you think we should kind of shy away from that and stick with our cars and the way that things are done?
Yeah, it obviously depends on the market. Like a downtown Miami is very different than a Boca Raton, which is very different than a much more rural place. But I think the trend is more walkable, transit oriented, and not getting away from the cars. And I think the cities are seeing that. So rather than having these huge parking garages and CISA parking, I think over time those are going to be replaced with more buildings. And the beauty of a mixed use site is you have different components, and when the office is busy, the residential isn't, and when the office is quiet, the retail is, and that way you can kind of share smaller parking spaces but get mixed uses. So I think people want to be more walkable and don't want to have to drive in a car and drive 30 minutes to go to a restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look on like any maps or anything, you just realize like how much space like the parking lots are taking up and how much of it could be used for other things. It's
relative to like the buildings, the parking spaces double or triple the size of a lot. And if you can transform that, and that's part of several projects that we're doing, is that where we're taking parking lots and building another use into an already existing project. And those I think are going to be much more the future, because South Florida doesn't have really any land left. We have the ocean, we have the Everglades, there's a few 100 acres of land, so the only way to build is to build on existing, and parking lots make the most sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, I tend to think parking lots, hopefully most of them will be converted into other types of spaces, because I would guess or hope that over the long term we really don't need as many parking lots. And I think that'll be tied to long term, right? So I don't know. I'm kind of, I think these things will happen faster than they do, and they never do. But there's some really interesting progress on autonomous driving, right? And we may get to a point where it doesn't really make sense to have a car, because you can just call a car and it'll come just like an Uber will now, but it's all yours. And some of these models are designed in really cool ways. I like what Amazon's doing with theirs, which is like, there's no steering wheel. You sit sideways, you can relax. It's like a couch. Like it's like a little living room. Like, why have a car if one of those will come pick you up for a relatively cheap cost, cheaper than maintenance, ownership, and purchase of a vehicle, and then you'll just be getting dropped off.
And it's, sorry, go ahead, Ian. I was going to say it's kind of maybe sooner than we anticipate, because even at Brick, there is Guidant, which has the autonomous vehicles. They were a graduate of Tech Runway, I believe. I know you know them, of course. No one comes through the entrepreneurial ecosystem without knowing you. But, that we're looking to do something with them from a city perspective. The autonomous vehicles, we've all been on the rides with them to do the demo. It's pretty fascinating. Like you said, there is a steering wheel, but no one's touching it. It's crazy. But even in the interim, we have Ubers and things like that. So I think a smart city would certainly consider doing something where they're developing on the parcels and better uses than, like you said, than parking lots that just get sun drenched and they're underutilized for the most part.
Yeah, hopefully these locations start looking more like kind of an elementary school drop off, right? They just all have a loop.
Right. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
actually smart.
Forward-thinking developers are starting to plan that and have more of a drop-off area for that, because that's the future. So we're still kind of in between, where it's like, is it too early? But it's going to happen before we know it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's touch on relationships for a second. You're right. Most businesses today are all about Instagram, LinkedIn, DMing people, becoming influencers. But your industry is not like that as commonly, right? It's often that it's handshakes, thank you cards, and long-lasting, planting seeds that develop over time. So can you explain relationships and how impactful they are to your world?
Yeah, super impactful in a lot of ways. But and I'd say real estate historically has been very behind on tech, but it is starting to pick up, and there are like Twitter real estate influencers that I find fascinating. But it's kind of relationships, face-to-face meetings, handshakes, doing what you say. It's a long business, so doing something short-sighted to maybe gain an advantage on one deal will eventually catch up to you. So that's kind of how I was raised, and how I kind of run our business is it's a long game. So maybe you're giving up something here, but hopefully over time you'll get it. And people, I think, appreciate that, because there are a lot of people that take a very short-sighted and kind of selfish approach in the business, and those kind of separate out over time.
So when you talk relationships, kind of define a little bit further. Like, are you grabbing coffee with a lot of people? Are you grabbing lunch, dinner? Are you having events? You did at Restaurant Row, you had a ribbon cutting ceremony, and you met a lot of folks, and there's a lot of culture behind the scenes, of course.
Yeah, all the above. There's also big conferences in our industry that you kind of go to and meet a lot of people. But yeah, the one-on-one interactions, going to a bar, grabbing drinks, going to a sports game, with important people. Yeah, there's several categories of important people in our industry, and having those deep relationships. So you're the first call when there's a deal, or if you need financing, that lender knows you and trusts you on a personal level is always super impactful. People like doing business with people that they know and like, and just a phone call or Zoom doesn't, it sometimes it's necessary, but you can't always do it in person. But I think this industry is still very much focused on that. And I don't have enough time to do as much as I should, but that is a goal of mine, is to do that. Is the long-term benefits and value that you create over that is much more significant than anything. Yeah.
I know it's always hard because Kevin always speaks about there's no data backing it up, right? Like unlike Facebook ads where you're like, oh, this much converts, right? And just general advertising, when it comes to face-to-face relationships, it's hard to say, well, I met with 20 people for lunch and one of them converted. Can you speak to that, Kevin, for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to founders about that all the time, trying to kind of leverage the balance between like networking. You can get really networked out and over networked, but it's hard to tell that ROI, right? There aren't any analytics, and I love analytics. I'm a researcher at my core. So I like when I can see the data, the dividends, the ROI, the conversion rates, the customer acquisition costs, as opposed to like, well, I went to a few things, the event cost this, nothing happened. But I think if you are, trying your best to track it still, right? And that's my nature is getting the data, right? There's going to be a lot of trial and error early on, but you probably find out over time there are specific places you absolutely need to be, and there are other places you absolutely don't. And then there's probably some in between, and then kind of managing the process that way. Right. And knowing where you need to be and where you're kind of probably expected to be versus other things where it's like maybe, but they're not as valuable. So for instance, there may be a specific trade show for your industry where it's worth spending a lot of money. There may be a lot of other tangential ones where like, I don't know, it makes sense to go to that trade show, but it's not going to yield the same dividends, and you're better off going all in on the one. And I manage my own networking in the very same way, right? So next week I'll be at the Florida Venture Forum Early Stage Conference in Orlando. I need to be there. Absolutely, right? Given what I do in the entrepreneurship space, fundraising, capital, early stage investors. Yeah, definitely. But there are other events and local events where it's like, I'll go if I can make it, but I know that it's not going to be quite as valuable as a big statewide event like that.
Yeah, and you bring up a point about being networked out, right? So often people just go event to event to event, but they forget to follow up. So a lot of it's on the follow-up, sending an email, right? Sending a text message, and just keeping things alive after you've met someone. Because so often people go to event after event, week after week, and it's just like they get hundreds of business cards and they just sit on their desk, of course. So there's a big side of just being genuine. I think sometimes meeting less people, but making a point with those people that you do meet, just consistently following up with them. And that's part of the shrimp tank, right? Often that's my networking, and that's your networking, is like meeting a great entrepreneur week after week is so impactful. And then you're kind of pushing yourself each week to get in front of somebody. So I always recommend podcasting as a way, as an alternative to grabbing lunch and dinner often, or grabbing coffee.
Yeah. And then automating that back end process, right? Not so it's like dehuman and it's all done by a robot, but like putting things in a calendar, setting a reminding, having a process that kind of forces you to go through those steps, or that kind of does it for you, but you guide it and say, here's what I need it to do. But automating that back end is what I encourage every founder to do, because otherwise you just won't do it. There'll be something on fire. There'll be some critical thing. That's when people always call me, is when those surprises come up. So if you can, to the extent you can automate that, you'll do more of it.
Okay, let's jump into our last segment. I know the students designed a couple different ideas, Kevin. So
I got a couple pitches for the panel. A couple pitches for the whole panel. One is kind of broad and sweeping, and I don't know what you'll say. I bet Ian will have an opinion. And the other one's a real startup. So live action. We'll talk about that. Yeah. And I bet, again, Ian will have some insights. So the first one is just broad, general. these floating real estate projects. What do you think about that?
Interesting. Yeah, I just saw like a paddle court floating in the ocean and boats, going to that. So that seems cool, but yeah, I don't know if commercial property would do well floating. The ability to get to that property would be kind of hindered.
You would get rid of parking lots.
You don't need parking lots, but yeah, I think cool, but probably not super successful.
All right, let's talk about the real one because I think it's interesting. I'm biased because I've worked with the founder, but I think it's really interesting and a potential solution to the housing crisis. But you're welcome to say, no, this is a bad idea. So what this company does, they're called Respace. And what they do is they buy residential properties, single family homes. And then they do a ton of construction, that scary, kind of risky part. And they turn them into duplexes or triplexes, right? So they turn a house into three or four separate apartments. And then the interesting thing, I think, is their business and financial model. Rather than renting those, they don't rent those. They sell those to the individual owners, with the idea being that this generation of students who are graduating soon or graduated in the last 10 years and haven't been able to afford a house, they can buy that unit and begin building up equity within that unit. But Respace, the overarching company, they own the property, the overarching property. So obviously you can't take your unit with you anyways. It's built into the house, but what you can do when you move out is sell it at the market price to the next customer. What are your thoughts? You investing?
I potentially would invest. That have a lot of questions, but it is an interesting concept, and I think affordability of housing is probably the number one issue in South Florida, if not the country, and just where costs and everything are, it's hard to develop that. So if you can take something that's existing, chop it up, and make it more affordable to people, I think that sounds like a great idea.
They're based in Seattle. That's where the first three properties are.
Yeah.
And the zoning's a little bit easier there, I think, than it would be here. Like I don't think my HOA is gonna be down with me doing that to my house.
Be a community that was kind of built around that, not a one-off situation in a community.
Yeah, it is. It's not for every property, so you got to pick your spots. But I'm pretty bullish on it.
Yeah.
Jason, what do you think?
But honestly, you lost me on the whole pitch. I missed it.
Jason wasn't paying
attention. It went right over my head. No, I was trying to understand the difference between like that and condo and a co-op. I was trying to. You lost me on what the difference is. Like someone buying a condo, right? You buy one unit in a building compared to chopping it up. So you kind of went over my head.
It's the same idea.
Condo in a house.
Yeah,
so you're pretty much
converting
a
single family residential home into more of a condo with multiple owners.
It's a condo. That's why you're losing me on it. It's like the same thing. It already exists. I know what you're saying. It's like it's a house and it's got a property and you could share the pool, but it's too. I guess I'm not seeing the difference.
Well,
it's over my head. You lost me.
Well,
I'm with Jason on this. I see you looking at me. I'm going with Jason on this one.
One big circle to what a condo is.
I'm with Jay.
All right, we're gonna do it to Jason. Jason's
not
house.
Take my house.
Well, if you do it to his house, then I'm in.
Yeah.
Are you selling a segment of my pool? That's community property then.
Yeah, that part would be tricky.
Creative though, very creative.
Okay, well, before we wrap up today's episode, Ian, we always like to share with the students if there's any opportunities for internships or careers. So can you just tell the students in general, as they're graduating, just typical opportunities and what it's like to work for your brand?
Sure. Yeah, we take summer interns, and in the past they have converted to full-time employees. So as we continue to hopefully grow, we'll continue to kind of need additional team members to join. So I'd kind of recommend that you get kind of some experience, learn about the real estate industry, and then feel free to contact us through LinkedIn or website or emails, and if there's an opportunity, would love to have some young, bright people join a growing business that are based in Boca Raton. Our office is 10 minutes away from here, so that makes it convenient. And I think whether you want to start with us or a bigger kind of company, I think you just got to get your foot in the door and then kind of go from there. So the first job is always the hardest, and then after that it becomes easier. So I'd encourage you to just reach out to us and to other contacts and be persistent until you land something.
And Jessica, what about with the city of Boca? Any opportunities for students?
Yes, lots of opportunities at the city. We have a website, myboca.us. If you go on our website and look under career opportunities, it'll take you to a separate website, everything from internships, full-time, part-time, and then, of course, regular employment, full-time employment. But certainly check out the website. There's always opportunities at the city, especially now that summer's coming. There's summer jobs available, whether it be lifeguarding. And, the city owns a lot of facilities in Boca. All those amenities that you spend your weekend doing, there are people working there. So certainly check out the site.
Okay. Well, Jessica, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks
Ian,
for having me.
thanks for joining us. And for everybody watching, we'll be back next Thursday right around 1:30 p.m. Take care.
Thank you.